What's up everybody, welcome back. So today I don't really have an intro for you guys. We're gonna continue working on the optimization in our character to get rid of the multicast events, and that's pretty much it. So one side note, if you would like to get your hands on the project file, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or become a Patreon, and then you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord, and those will also give you access to the project files of this project. So with that stuff out of the way, let's just dive into our character and continue our optimization. So I want to start with the multicast for the MeleeImpact, and over here we have a slightly more interesting one because we're using inputs over here. So we need to come up with a way to get rid of the inputs and still be able to use a rep notify. So in this case, I'm going to create a structure with this information, and we're going to use that structure as a rep notify variable. So we need a location, a rotation, and then an animation montage. So let's minimize this. And then we're going to right click and go to blueprints and create a new structure. So I'm going to call this my structure damage info. That's the caps lock. And let's open this one up. So we needed the location, and that's a vector. And then we also need the rotation, and that's also a vector in this case. And we need the animation, and that's the montage. So let's just call this montage, and then turn it into an animation montage. So we can save the structure and close it down. And then we want to create a new variable inside of the character over here. And that's going to be our structure underscore damage info. So that's the type damage info. And then we want to set this to rep notify. So replication rep notify. And we can simply use this to update our multicast event. So first of all, we need to go into the events or the functions that actually set these variables. So those are the take AI damage and take PvP damage functions. So let's do the AI damage first. And over here, we're calling the multicast events. So we want to get rid of this. And over here, simply set the rep notify variable. So let's grab a setter for our new variable, and then we can simply drag off here and make a structure and move over the pins. So we're going to grab the location, the rotation, and then the montage, and plug it in so we can get rid of the multicast call, and this should take care of it. So let's copy and paste it to do the same thing over here. There we go. And we can get rid of this call, and this should work. So then we need to do the same thing inside of the PvP damage function. So take PvP damage. And in here again we have two multicast calls. So we can simply grab the setter for our new variable and move over all of the pins. And do the same thing for the upper branch. There we go. So let's get rid of the multicast calls. So this will take care of the notify, and then inside of the onRep damage info, we're gonna simply call our multicast event. So that's the multicast AI MeleeImpact. And then we're not going to use these inputs. So let's just go to the event, and then we can get rid of the inputs over here. And also make sure that we turn it from a multicast event to a non-replicated event. So it's just a normal event right now. And then we can simply grab our new variable. And we're going to break the structure over here and simply plug everything in. So we have the location, the rotation, and our animation montage over here. So that one is done as well. So we could rename our multicast event. There we go. So compile and save it, and let's move on to the next one. So we're gonna do the crouching next. So let's just look for this crouching event. And over here, so we're gonna start at the input event. And again, we need to be a little bit creative, because over here we're using our isMoving variable. And this variable is only set locally. So we're setting this on event tick, and it's only running on the local instance of the character. And in this case, for the crouching, all of the other instances need to know the correct variable as well. So we could make it that this variable is replicated by itself, but then we need to add replicated events to our event tick. So that's not really what we want to do. So we're simply going to create a second boolean, and that's the one we're going to replicate. So let's do that first. Create a new bool, and I'm going to call that crouch is moving. So we're going to turn this into a boolean, and we're going to simply set it to replicate. So not rep notify, but normal replication. And then for the actual starting and stopping of the crouching, where we are going to replace the multicast events, for those we want to create rep notify variables. So let's do that right away. And in this case we need two of them. So the first one is going to be rep start crouch. So that's a boolean, and we're going to turn the replication to a rep notify. And then we want to create a second one, and that's going to be rep stop crouch. And again, that's a boolean that we need to set to rep notify. Now over here for the input event, first of all, let's take care of the normal boolean, so the crouch is moving boolean. If we are the server, we can simply set it ourselves. So we're gonna just plug it in over here in the hasAuthority branch, and then set our crouch is moving. So this will replicate because the server sets it. And then we can do the same thing over here for the released pin if we're stop crouching. So just plug it in over here. And then if we are a client, then we actually need to make sure that the server sets it for us. So we're going to use the server stop crouch event for the clients. So that's over here, stop crouch and start crouch. So those are these two events. And we simply want to set the booleans in here as well. So we can get rid of the multicast calls. Plug this in first. So now all of the instances of our character will know the correct move state. And then we need to make sure that we set our rep notify booleans. So for the start crouching over here, we can simply drag it in for the server and set it directly. So we're going to set it and then grab a getter and flip it around with a not bool. And plug it in over here. So we can do the same thing for our stop crouching. So let's grab replicate stop crouch. We're going to set it over here for the server. And then we're going to get the current value and flip it around. So use a not bool and plug it in over here as well. So for the start and the stop crouch server events, we want to do the same thing. So we can copy these setters for the rep notify variables and paste them in over here. There we go. And now we need to make sure that we set up the events correctly. So we have our multicast start crouch, and we simply want to turn it into a not replicated event. And instead of using the input over here, we're gonna simply use our variable. So disconnect the input, we can actually just get rid of it. And then grab our crouch is moving bool and plug that one into the branch over here. And do the same thing for the stop crouching. So let's get rid of the input. and turn it into a normal event, non-replicated, and then we're going to grab the boolean and plug it in over here. So then the last thing we need to do is call these events from our onWrap functions. So let's go over here. So we have the onWrap start crouch, and in here we simply want to call our start crouch. Let me double check. So we still have multicast in here, so let's rename them. So this is simply going to be stop crouch, and this is simply going to be start crouch. And then in the onWrap start crouch, we can call our start crouch event. And for the onWrap stop crouch, we can call our stop crouch event. There we go. And so if we go back to the event graph, then this should be good to go. So we can get rid of these calls over here and these ones. And now we should have everything set up. So the server sets the replicated bool, rep notify. Yeah, this should be good to go. So we already have the crouching taken care of as well. So let's continue with the next one. Let's see what we have left. So we could do the melee montage. Multicast melee montage. So this is a pretty simple one, no inputs or that, so we can simply just grab our new rep notify variable, set it for the server over here, for the clients in a server replicated event, and then make sure this is a normal event. So we can create the new boolean first, and I'm gonna call this one rep melee montage. So that's a bool, that's fine, and then set the replication to our rep notify. So we don't need to call our multicast for the server, we can simply set the bool over here. So let's grab a setter, plug it in, grab a getter and flip it around again. So not bool, and plug it in over here. So for the clients, we want to do it in a server replicated event, so we can do it over here. And get rid of the multicast call as well. And for the multicast play melee montage, we need to make sure it's a non-replicated event, and we can rename it if we would like to. And then simply go to our onWrap function again, onWrap play melee montage, and we're gonna call our play melee montage. And that's done as well. So compile, save it. And let's move on to the next one, so we can do our grenade montage. So this one isn't too special either. If we move down a little, on the released pin over here, we have a switch authority. And this is where we actually play the montages. So we can simply grab a boolean again and make sure this will trigger the montage with a notify. So let's create a new boolean again, and this is going to be a rep grenade montage. So let's get rid of the little plus sign over here. There we go. So this is going to be a rep notify variable, and for the server over here we're simply gonna set it. So let's get rid of the multicast call and simply set our new boolean. Grab the current value and flip it around. And then we can copy this stuff. So we can get rid of the multicast call over here. If we copy this and go to the server event over here, then we want to make sure the server sets it if we are a client. So let's move this over. And then get rid of the multicast call in here as well. And then all we need to do is grab our multicast event, turn it back to a non-replicated event, and possibly rename it as well. And then dive into our onWrap function to make sure this gets called. So we want to call our grenade montage. And that's another one taken care of. Compile, save it. And then there's really only one multicast left in here, and that's our multicast set velocity for the grenades. And for this one, we want to create the replicated variable on the actual grenade. So let's go to our blueprint for the grenade. Let's go to weapons, grenade, and then we have our BP, BP grenade. So in here, we are going to create a new variable and call this one grenade velocity. So this needs to be a vector, and then we want to set this vector to be a repNotify variable. And then this will create our onRep function. So let's go in here first. And from here, we simply want to call our event. So that's over here, multicast set velocity. So we're going to drag off here, multicast set velocity. And then for the actual event, we're going to get rid of the input. So let's just delete that one. Make sure it's not a multicast event, but it's a normal event. So we could get rid of the name multicast as well. And over here, we simply want to plug in our variable. There we go. And then if we compile and save, we can go back to our hero base character. And over here, we don't want to call this set velocity event, but we simply want to set the variable on the grenade. So we can grab this pin over here and then set our grenade velocity. There we go. And we're gonna plug in the velocity over here and move over these pins. So we can get rid of the event call over here and simply only have a setter. Compile and save that one. And now we should have no more multicasts on our hero base character. So we actually got rid of all of them. So we did some pretty good cleanup, and this should actually improve our performance a little bit as well. So let's do a quick little test to see if we didn't actually break anything. So we changed our MeleeImpact, we changed our crouching, the melee montage and the grenade stuff. So let's check crouching, that's working. If I'm actually meleeing, that's working as well for both sides, and I should be able to just toss grenades as well. And that's working as well. So if we switch to the host, we should be able to see our montages. That's working. Our crouching is still working. We can still take damage, although there is no actual animation playing for the melee impact, so that might be an issue. And if we are throwing grenades, then that still replicates as well. So we didn't break a lot, but possibly we broke our melee montage. So let's have a look at that. So that was a small mistake on my end. So inside of the take PvP damage function, I forgot to connect up the actual setter for the set with notify. And with this connected, we should have a hit reaction montage as well. So let's double check it and then move on. So the game is loading, and let's see what happens this time. So this time we actually have our hit reaction working as well, and that's working for both the host and the client. So that should be good to go. So we didn't actually break anything, so that's good to know. So these are the usual errors, but nothing code related, so that's good to go as well. I think we're gonna start taking a look at setting up some soft object references as well. So let's take a look at soft and hard object references. So if you're also following my multiplayer inventory tutorial, then you probably already know what we're gonna do and what this means. But for the people who are not following that, let me give a brief explanation. So for example, if I would open up the character customization table, in here we are actually referencing all kinds of assets. So if I expand this, we have all kinds of models and animations in here. And if we are actually using this data table, so if I right click and go to the reference viewer, then all of the assets inside of the data table will be loaded by default. And it doesn't really matter if we use them or not. They will simply be loaded, and this has a search limit, so if I expand it, you can see there's actually a ton of stuff that's being loaded with each data table. And we can do something about that by changing these assets into soft object references. And if we do that, we can tell the game when to load them. So we won't be stuck with all kinds of assets we are not using. So for example, if I'm playing a solo player game and I'm picking the blue mini character, then it doesn't need to load the green and the gray and the red character, but by default it will do that because all of that stuff is inside of this data table. So we want to change that, and the way to do that is start with the structure. So we need to make changes to the structure, and to do that we want to make sure that everything in our project is saved. And then we're going to open our model and skin structure, and in here we want to replace all of the assets with soft object references. So we have a skeletal mesh over here, and we can simply search for a skeletal mesh again, but this time we want to select the skeletal mesh soft object reference. So pick this one. And you will see the color changing over here. So right now we have a soft object reference and it will not be loaded by default. So we want to do the same thing for the material instances over here inside of our maps. So let's change those as well to a material instance. And this time we're going to select the soft object reference and do the same thing for the other map. So material instance. And then a soft object reference. And then all the way at the bottom over here, we have our animation sequence. And for this one, we also want to turn it into a soft object reference. So anim sequence and then select the soft object one. So with the changes in the structure, we're going to only save the structure, close the structure down. And this time we have a structure that actually is nested inside another structure, inside of our character customization. So we're going to open this one up as well and only save it and then close it back down. Now we're going to close our project, and all of this stuff, we don't want to save it. So don't save. Make sure you don't break the project by accidentally saving it. So make sure you do it like this and then you should be good to go. So we can reopen our project. And then we can start fixing things up. So the project is back up, and immediately you will see that our hero base character broke. So we need to make some fixes in here. So let's start with the hero base character. And really the only place we're using this is inside of the SetModelAndSkin function. So let's open this one up, and over here we are encountering the changed data table that we need to fix. So we want to use the async load asset, and because we're using latent nodes, we cannot do that inside of a function. And we actually have 3 of them over here, so the easiest thing we could do is just convert this function back to an event. So let's do that first. In the list over here, we can right click and then convert function to event. So select that one. And if you do it like this, then the calls to this event will actually stay valid. So you don't need to worry about renaming stuff and things like that. This will just work. And now we need to take care of our soft object references. So first let's do the model. We want to drag off the model and we want to async load asset. So this will actually load the asset into the memory, and then we have a completed pin, and that will fire once the asset is actually loaded. But it returns an object, so we do need to cast it. So we want to cast it to a skeletal mesh. So drag off here, cast to skeletal mesh. And just to make things look a little bit neater, I'm going to convert it to a pure cast, but it doesn't really change anything in the way this functions. And then if we have our skeletal mesh ready, we can use that to set the skeletal mesh over here. And we want to make sure that we plug this into the completed pin. So that should take care of the mesh. And over here, we're actually setting the materials for the mesh. So in this case, before we do that, we need to make sure that our mesh is actually loaded. So from here, we want to continue from the completed pin. So from the set skeletal mesh node over here. So let's disconnect it for a brief moment. And then, no, let's keep it, by the way, because first we want to check if we are actually using this material slot or not. So if we're not using it, we don't need to load the asset anyway. So if we are using this material slot, then we want to drag off the skin 0. Make sure you grab the correct mapping. So we have skin 1 and skin 0. And in here we want to find. Now we can simply grab the skin name from here and move it over. And then we need to cast this again to a material instance. So whenever you kind of forgot what kind of variable type you created, you can simply go over here to the soft object reference, and there it will name it. So map of names to material instance soft object references. So the material instance is what you need to cast to. So over here we're going to cast to material instance. Freaking really. Okay, I'm screwing things up. Obviously, first of all, we want to async load asset, otherwise it doesn't work. So first call the async load asset, connect this one to the true pin, and then we can cast it to a material instance. So again, I'm going to convert this one to a pure cast. We can plug the actual material into the set material node over here. This needs to be connected to the completed pin. So we can only set the material after it's loaded. And then for the next one, we can grab the upper execution pin and simply plug it into the bool over here. And make sure that the one from the set material node, that we disconnect this one. So get rid of this one, connect it from the upper pin over here and from the false pin from the branch. So if we're not using this first material slot, we might still be using the other slot. So we want to check that. And if we started loading the asset, we don't need to wait until this is done. We can simply continue and start loading the next one. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to drag off the second map for the skins. And again, we're going to find. So we can move over our skin name over here. And then we need to async load this asset as well. So drag off here, async load asset. So this goes into the true pin. And then if this is completed, we can set the material after we casted it to a material instance. So material instance. Make this a pure cast. And then we can simply plug it into the material over here. So we can get rid of this stuff. And this actually cleaned up our errors. So let's double check we have all of the pins connected properly. So this goes from the completed pin to the branch. That's good. Then from this completed pin, it stops after setting the material. So you don't want to connect it over here again, because over here we're already continuing execution by the upper pin. So this is connected to the branch and the false pin is connected to the next branch as well. So that should be good to go. So let's compile and save it. And then the easiest thing we can do is grab this get data table row for the character customization table. And we can right click it and then find all of the references. So in this blueprint, there's only one. But if we click the little binocular sign over here, you will see there's actually a few more. So we need to fix those as well. So let's start with the menu GameMode. And this is actually to set our lobby character. So in here, we do need to make some changes to make sure that our models and skins are fixed. So let me grab my notes in here quickly. So again, let's just start with setting the model, and then after the model is loaded and it's actually set, we can set the materials and the mesh animation. So we need a little bit of room over here. So let's move things over. And first of all, we're going to grab the soft object model reference and we want to async load asset. So plug that one into the row found pin. And after it's loaded, we need to cast it to a skeletal mesh. So I'm going to make this a pure cast again. And then from the completed pin, we can call our client set character mesh and plug in the actual mesh from the cast over here. So if this is done, we want to continue by setting the mesh animation. So we're going to drag off our lobby animation soft object reference. And again, we're going to async load asset. So plug it in over here after the client set character mesh. So we need to cast this as well, and this was an animation sequence. So over here, we're going to cast to an anim sequence, turn it to a pure cast, and then if this loaded, so if this is completed, we can play the mesh animation and actually plug it in over here. And now, because the model is already loaded, we don't need to wait to also set the skins. So we don't need to wait till the animation is loaded before we start setting the skins. So we can disconnect this over here after the client play mesh animation. And we're going to continue from the upper pin from our async load asset. So we're going to grab our skins null map, and over here we're going to find. So we want to move over the name over here from the find node. So these names all come from the same pin, so it doesn't really matter which one you pick. And so we can move this alt node out of the way, and then we want to grab our branch first. So we want to make sure we're actually using this skin before we start loading it. So from the upper pin over here, connect it to the branch. If this is true, we want to async load the asset that we found here. So async load asset, plug this in the true pin, and then we need to cast it to our material instance. Instance. So this is going to be a pure cast, and then I'm going to grab our client set skin material. So this goes into the completed pin because the asset needs to be loaded first, and then we can plug in our material instance over here. And then do the same thing for the lower branch. So we want to grab our branch over here. We don't want to continue after our client set skin material, so we're going to disconnect this one. We do want to continue from the async load asset, the upper pin. So that's the pin that immediately continues execution without waiting for the asset to be loaded. And from the false pin, we also want to continue to the next branch. So then we can grab our skin 1 skins mapping. And from here, we also want to find whatever is in here. So move over the name to find. And then we can async load this asset as well. So this goes into the true pin, and then we can grab our cast for the material instance, plug it in over here, and then call our client set skin material from this completed pin and plug in our material instance. So this can go, and we have this one fixed up and good to go. So compile, and we still have errors because we also have this stuff inside of our set lobby character model and skin function. So again, this is a function and we cannot use our latent nodes in here. And because we're actually having a view, so we're setting the mesh, the animation and the skin 2 times. So we can create custom events and call them from in this function, but because we have 4 of them, we might as well just convert this function back to an event. So we're going to grab our function, set lobby character model and skin, right click and convert function to event. So this is pretty messy the way he pasted it in. So let's just make sure everything is untangled first. There we go. So this is the actual event. And then we want to move this over here. So we need to fix this up. And again, we can do pretty much the same as we did up here. So we're going to start with the model. Grab our soft object reference, and from here we want to async load asset again. So we need to do this before we set our character mesh. So let's make a little bit room, plug it into the row bound pin. This object needs to be cast to the skeletal mesh. So I'm going to use a pure cast. And then if this is completed, we can call our multicast set character mesh, plug in our new character mesh, and this one is good to go. So again, we're also setting the animation and the skins for the mesh. So we want to make sure that the mesh is actually updated before we continue. So from here, we're going to continue after this completed pin. So we're just going to continue from the current branch. So we want to grab our lobby animation soft object reference, and we're going to async load asset again over. So plug this one in over here, and we need to cast it to our animation sequence. Make it a pure cast, and then from the completed pin we can set our multicast play mesh animation. Plug in the new animation to play. Now over here we want to disconnect it at the end because we don't need to wait loading the skins till the actual animation is loaded. So we can just grab the upper pin over here. So grab this pin, plug it into the branch to check if we're actually using this material slot. And if we are, we want to async load this asset. So we're going to grab our skins 0 skins mapping, and we're going to find, so we can move over our row name, and then we need to cast this to our material instance again. So let's just grab the node from here, cast to material instance, and then after we made the cast, okay, we need to async load asset first, so I forgot that one. Async load asset, plug this one into the true pin, then we can cast it, and after the cast succeeded, from the completed pin we're gonna plug in the material. So this one at the end we want to disconnect again, and then we're gonna grab the false pin, go to the next branch, and we're also going to grab the upper pin from the async load asset and also plug that into the second branch. So for this one again we need to replace the find node. So we're going to grab our skin 1 skins, and over here again we're going to find, move over the name pin, and then we need to async load asset. So plug that one in first. Then we can cast it after it's loaded, and from the completed pin set the skin material and make sure you plug in the actual material instance. So this one can go and this one can go as well, and we have this one fixed up as well. So let's double check the pins to make sure. The first one is from the completed pin. After setting the character mesh we continue. And then over here, all of the completed pins are dead ends, so they don't continue at the end. And we're simply continuing from the upper branches from the async load asset and the false branch over here. So this should be good to go as well. Let's compile and save it, and let's see what else we need to fix. So let's get back to our find result over here. So there's 2 in the menu game mode, we just did both of them, and then we have one inside of the menu controller, so let's double check this one. And we're actually using the lobby animation over here, so we do need to fix this one up in the LeaveLoadoutMenu event. And this is actually pretty simple, so we can just grab our soft object reference and we're going to async load asset. So from the row found pin, we're going to plug this in, and then from the upper pin, we're going to continue to the get all actors of class, just like this. And then over here, when the asset is loaded, we're going to cast it to our animation sequence. And I'm going to make it a pure cast again and plug it into the play animation node, and then make sure that we plug this one into the completed pin. So this should be good to go. That wasn't really too hard. And let's see, there should be 1 or 2 left. So let's grab our find results again. And we actually have our character menu. So let's double check and see what's in here. So over here, we're only using the unlock level, so we don't need to fix this one up. And then the next one, we're only using the models and skin structure, so we don't need to fix that one either. And the next one is in the character customization button pressed event. So over here, we're also using the models and skins, so that's not a biggie. But the last one I think is... so let me double check over here. So over here we're actually using a new okay, this is actually in another function, I'm sorry. So you can simply hit compile and then it will throw the error. So apparently we're inside of the open customization menu, and in here we have our model and skin structure that we're breaking. And from the model and skin structure we're getting all the keys, but this mapping actually changed. So we need to make sure that we change this part. So this is the skin 0 skins mapping. So let's grab this one. And from here we're going to get all of the keys. And then we can simply replace this node over here and get rid of the old one. And that's the only thing we need to fix. Yeah, now we are compiled and good to go. So we have our character menu done as well. And I think those are actually all of the references. So we had all of them. So that should be good to go. So let's just run a little test to make sure we didn't actually break anything, and then I think we're going to continue with the weapon info data table in the next video. So we do have an issue that we need to take care of. So right now, if I'm launching the game, and I'm just going to launch a solo game quickly, there's things messed up. So we don't have any weapons and we don't have a dashing animation, for example. So somewhere something is screwed up, and if we look at the errors over here, we don't actually have an animation instance set up, and that will make it so that our event begin play will stop executing over here because this cast failed. And that's kind of weird, to be honest, because inside of our viewport, if we select our mesh, there's still an animation blueprint assigned over here. So what I did to fix this is simply assign a mesh in here. So I'm going to assign the Quinn mesh. This is by default, that doesn't really matter. If we select another mesh, this will just be overwritten. And with an actual mesh in place here, that should fix our problems. So if we just host a 2-player game right now, then we can test to see if everything is working. So let me set up a lobby quickly. So that's pretty much good to go. Now, for example, if we go to our select character menu, we are still able to select different characters. So that's pretty much working. So it's not updating for the host right now. So that's a bit of an issue. Oh no, that's not an issue because these are characters that are locked. So the locked characters actually don't update on the other player's screen. So only if we actually select a character that's unlocked, it will change. So that's good to go. So all of the models over here are loading, the different skins are loading, so we didn't really break anything in here. Let me see, so if I turn this into a green one, that's good to go as well. So if we start the game, we should be back up and running, we should have weapons, we should have our animation instance, and all of that stuff set. So let's double check. That seems to be working. So right now, all of this stuff is working. I can't kill him because I accidentally loaded an endless wave game, but that's no biggie. So we have the animation instance set up, we have dashing animations back, our weapons are up. So for some reason, having no mesh set up in the character blueprint kind of makes things buggy. So just as a fix, if this happens to you, make sure you assign a mesh to the character and then you should be good to go. So, and now we're only left with our physics errors, so that's no biggie. So if I actually encounter any problems, I will take care of them in the next episode, and we're gonna wrap it up for today. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.